Naivety refers to a lack of experience, wisdom, or sophistication, often resulting in a person being easily deceived or manipulated. When someone is naive, they may trust others too readily, overlook potential risks, or fail to recognize ulterior motives. This trait can be exploited in various ways. Deception. Naive individuals may believe false information or promises without questioning their validity. Scammers and con artists often prey on this vulnerability by presenting themselves as trustworthy or offering enticing opportunities that seem too good to be true. Manipulation. Naive people may be easily influenced by others' opinions or emotions, making them susceptible to manipulation. This can occur in personal relationships, where someone may exploit another's naivety for personal gain or to exert control. Social pressure. Naive individuals may feel pressure to conform to group norms or expectations, even if they are harmful or unethical. This can lead to participation in risky or dangerous activities without fully understanding the consequences. Overall, naivety leaves individuals vulnerable to exploitation by those who seek to take advantage of their lack of knowledge or discernment. It's important for people to educate themselves, develop critical thinking skills, and approach new situations with a healthy level of skepticism to avoid being exploited. Pythagorean numerology, rooted in the teachings of the ancient Greek philosopher Pythagoras, emphasizes the spiritual significance of numbers and their relationships to the cosmos. From an occult perspective, Pythagorean numerology is often associated with esoteric and mystical interpretations of numbers, believing that numbers hold inherent qualities and vibrations that influence various aspects of life and existence. In Jewish mysticism, particularly within the tradition of Kabbalah, numerical symbolism plays a significant role. Kabbalistic teachings attribute mystical meanings to numbers, viewing them as conduits for divine energy and pathways to understanding the universe's hidden mysteries. The most well-known system of Jewish numerology is gematria, which assigns numerical values to Hebrew letters and words. By analyzing the numerical equivalents of words and phrases, practitioners of gematria seek deeper insights into spiritual truths and divine connections. From both occult and Jewish mystical perspectives, numbers are seen as symbols of cosmic harmony, divine order, and spiritual enlightenment. Practitioners may use numerical analysis for divination, meditation, or gaining insights into the nature of reality and the human soul. Ultimately, the interpretation of numbers in Pythagorean numerology and Jewish mysticism reflects a belief in the interconnectedness of the physical and spiritual realms, where numbers serve as keys to unlocking deeper truths about existence. Numerology can be used to target the subconscious pattern recognition of the human mind through the manipulation of numbers and their associated meanings, focusing on the negative aspects of the numbers 9 and 11. Here's how. Repetition. By repeatedly exposing individuals to the numbers 9 and 11 or numerical patterns containing these digits in contexts associated with negative events or outcomes, numerologists can instill a sense of fear, apprehension, or foreboding. This repetition can amplify feelings of anxiety or uncertainty, as the subconscious mind internalizes the perceived significance of these numbers. Symbolism. While numbers like 9 and 11 can have positive connotations, they also carry negative associations in certain contexts. For example, the number 9 can be associated with endings, loss, and despair, while the number may 11th evoke thoughts of chaos, instability, and tragedy. Numerologists can exploit these negative symbolic meanings to provoke emotional responses and heighten subconscious anxieties. Confirmation bias. Numerologists can manipulate confirmation bias by selectively highlighting instances where the numbers 9 and 11 coincide with adverse events or outcomes. By emphasizing negative occurrences associated with these numbers, they reinforce existing fears or concerns, leading individuals to perceive them as omens of impending disaster or misfortune. Visual representation. Visual representations of the numbers 9 and 11 in contexts evoking fear or danger can intensify their impact on the subconscious mind. For example, ominous imagery or dark color schemes may accompany numerical patterns featuring these digits, heightening feelings of unease or dread. These visual cues can evoke visceral reactions that bypass conscious rationalization, reinforcing negative associations with the numbers. Subliminal messaging. numerological messages involving the numbers 9 and 11 can be subtly integrated into media or communication channels, triggering subconscious responses without individuals' conscious awareness. By embedding these numbers within narratives or imagery associated with fear-inducing scenarios, numerologists can sow seeds of apprehension or paranoia, influencing perceptions and behaviors on a subconscious level. Overall, numerology can be leveraged to exploit individuals' innate psychological vulnerabilities, amplifying negative emotions and fostering a sense of impending doom or calamity associated with the numbers 9 and 11. By capitalizing on fear-based responses and confirmation bias, numerologists can shape subconscious perceptions and behaviors in ways that align with their intended narrative or agenda. The process of how ideas start from the planting of a seed and eventually grow into trees can be metaphorically likened to the growth of literal trees from seeds. Just as a seed is planted in fertile soil, an idea begins with a spark of inspiration or creativity in the mind of an individual. This initial seed can come from various sources, such as personal experiences, observations, conversations, reading, or exposure to new information or perspectives. After a seed is planted, it germinates and sends out roots to anchor itself in the soil and absorb nutrients. Similarly, an idea begins to take root as the individual reflects on it, explores its implications, and starts to develop it further. These roots represent the foundational aspects of the idea, including its core concepts, principles, and potential applications. As the seedling grows, it develops a stem and branches that extend upward and outward. Likewise, as the idea matures, it expands and branches out into different directions, generating new insights, perspectives, and possibilities. This growth may involve collaboration with others, refinement through discussion and feedback, and exploration of related concepts or fields. Over time, the seedling grows into a mature tree with a strong trunk and an extensive network of branches and leaves. Similarly, as the idea continues to evolve and develop, it matures into a comprehensive framework or concept that is well established and robust. This mature idea may have far-reaching implications, influence, and applications, impacting various aspects of society, culture, or knowledge. The process of how ideas start from the planting of a seed and grow into trees involves nurturing and cultivating the initial inspiration, allowing it to take root, and fostering its development and expansion over time. Just as trees provide shade, shelter, and sustenance, mature ideas can enrich our understanding, inspire innovation, and shape the world around us. A voice can be a powerful weapon in several ways. Through vocal expression, individuals can raise awareness about important issues, injustices, or challenges facing society. By speaking out, they can shine a light on hidden or overlooked problems, bringing them to the attention of the public and decision-makers. A compelling voice can inspire others to take action, whether it's through activism, advocacy, or grassroots organizing. By articulating a vision for change and conveying a sense of urgency, individuals can mobilize others to join movements for social justice, equality, or environmental sustainability. Through storytelling, personal testimony, or persuasive rhetoric, a voice can evoke empathy and foster understanding among diverse communities. By sharing their experiences, struggles, and aspirations, individuals can bridge divides, challenge stereotypes, and promote dialogue and reconciliation. A bold and fearless voice can challenge the status quo and confront entrenched power structures, systems of oppression, or prevailing narratives. By speaking truth to power and refusing to remain silent in the face of injustice, individuals can disrupt complacency and demand accountability and change. Voices that resonate with authenticity, integrity, and passion can catalyze cultural shifts and redefine norms, values, and attitudes. Through art, music, literature, or public discourse, individuals can shape public opinion, challenge prevailing paradigms, and foster a more inclusive and equitable society. By using their voice to amplify the voices of marginalized or underrepresented communities, individuals can empower others to speak up and claim their rights and dignity. By creating platforms for dialogue, collaboration, and collective action, they can build solidarity and strengthen movements for change. The process of idea formation, likened to the growth of trees from seeds, begins with inspiration and reflection. Ideas, like seeds, germinate and take root, branching out with exploration and collaboration. As they mature, they become robust frameworks with far-reaching implications, shaping society and culture. Similarly, a voice can be a potent force for change, raising awareness, inspiring action, and challenging the status quo. Through storytelling and advocacy, voices can bridge divides, catalyze cultural shifts, and empower marginalized communities, fostering a more equitable and just world. The concept of the 10th man originates from Jewish tradition and is based on the idea of critical thinking and independent analysis within a group or community. According to this concept, when a group of people is faced with a decision or a situation, it is important for there to be at least one person who takes a dissenting or opposing view, even if it goes against the consensus or majority opinion of the group. The term, 10th man, refers to this dissenting individual, who is tasked with the responsibility of considering alternative perspectives, raising doubts, and challenging the prevailing assumptions or conclusions of the group. This role is essential for preventing groupthink, promoting thorough examination of all possibilities, and guarding against potential errors or oversights in decision-making processes. The principle behind the 10th man concept is to ensure that diverse viewpoints are considered and that critical analysis is applied to decision-making, rather than simply following the crowd or accepting consensus without question. By embracing dissent and encouraging independent thinking, the 10th man contributes to more robust, balanced, and informed outcomes within the group or community. Dark tetrad of narcissism, Machiavellianism, psychopathy and sadism. They are called dark because of their malevolent qualities. All four dark tetrad traits are conceptually distinct, although empirical evidence shows them to be overlapping. They are associated with a callous, manipulative interpersonal style. Narcissism is characterized by grandiosity, pride, egotism, and a lack of empathy. Individuals who score high on narcissism display grandiosity, entitlement, dominance, and superiority. Narcissism has been found to correlate positively with extroversion and openness, and negatively with agreeableness. Narcissism has also been found to have a significant correlation with psychopathy. Psychopathy is considered the most malevolent of the dark triad. Individuals who score high on psychopathy show low levels of empathy and high levels of impulsivity and thrill-seeking. With respect to the big five personality factors, psychopathy has been found to correlate negatively with agreeableness and conscientiousness. Psychopathy is a neuropsychiatric disorder marked by deficient emotional responses, lack of empathy, and poor behavioral controls, commonly resulting in persistent antisocial deviance and criminal behavior. Machiavellianism is characterized by manipulation and exploitation of others, an absence of morality, unemotional callousness, and a higher level of self-interest. Psychopathy is characterized by continuous antisocial behavior, impulsivity, selfishness, callousness, and remorselessness. Psychopathy is characterized by persistent antisocial behavior, impaired empathy and remorse, and bold, disinhibited, and egotistical traits. Psychopathy is characterized by diagnostic features such as superficial charm, high intelligence, poor judgment and failure to learn from experience, pathological egocentricity and incapacity for love, lack of remorse or shame, impulsivity, grandiose sense of self-worth, pathological lying, manipulative behavior, poor self-control, promiscuous sexual behavior, juvenile delinquency, and criminal versatility, among others. Psychopaths may be manipulative, charming, and exploitative, and behave in an impulsive and risky manner. They may lack conscience or guilt, and refuse to accept responsibility for their actions. Antisocial personality disorder, ASPD, describes a condition marked by patterns of manipulation tactics and violation of others. Someone with ASPD goes against society, rules, and other behaviors that are more commonplace. ASPD is a particularly challenging type of personality disorder characterized by impulsive, irresponsible, and often criminal behavior. Someone with ASPD will typically be manipulative, deceitful, and reckless and will not care for other people's feelings. Like other types of personality disorder, ASPD is on a spectrum, which means it can range in severity from occasional bad behavior to repeatedly breaking the law and committing serious crimes. Psychopaths are considered to have a severe form of ASPD. A person with ASPD may exploit, manipulate, or violate the rights of others, lack concern, regret, or remorse about other people's distress, behave irresponsibly and show disregard for normal social behavior, have difficulty sustaining long-term relationships, be unable to control their anger, lack guilt, or not learn from their mistakes, blame others for problems in their lives, and repeatedly break the law. A person with ASPD will have a history of conduct disorder during childhood, such as truancy, not going to school, delinquency, for example, committing crimes or substance misuse, and other disruptive and aggressive behaviors. Sadism involves deriving pleasure through others undergoing discomfort or pain. Individuals possessing sadistic personalities tend to display recurrent aggression and cruel behavior. Sadism can also include the use of emotional cruelty, purposefully manipulating others through the use of fear, and a preoccupation with violence. The level and extent of sadistic violence may vary considerably, from infliction of mild pain and otherwise harmless love play to extreme brutality, sometimes leading to serious injury or death. The satisfaction of the sadist may result not from inflicting actual physical pain but rather from the mental suffering of the victim. Sexual urges may limit the level of violence, but in some cases, the aggressive impulse becomes predominant, and the sadist progresses to more extreme expressions of his violent tendencies. The term sadism is occasionally used outside the sexual context to describe individuals who are purposely cruel, or who seem to derive pleasure from humiliating and dominating others in social situations. There are 4 subtypes of sadism, termed enforcing sadism, explosive sadism, spineless sadism, and tyrannical sadism. Enforcing sadism, hostility sublimated in the public interest. Cops, bossy supervisors, deans, judges, possesses the right to be pitiless, merciless, coarse, and barbarous. Task is to control and punish, to search out rule breakers. Explosive sadism, unpredictably precipitous outbursts and fury, uncontrollable rage and fearsome attacks. Feelings of humiliation are pent up and discharged, subsequently contrite. Spineless sadism, insecure, bogus, and cowardly, venomous dominance and cruelty are counterphobic. Weakness counteracted by group support, public swaggering, selects powerless scapegoats. Tyrannical sadism, relish in menacing and brutalizing others, forcing them to cower and submit, verbally cutting and scathing, accusatory and destructive, intentionally surly, abusive, inhumane, unmerciful. Sexual sadism disorder is the condition of experiencing sexual arousal in response to the extreme pain, suffering, or humiliation of others. Paraphrasing 𝗖𝘆𝗰𝗲𝗶𝗴𝗲, a Dutch psychiatrist, best-selling 1956 book, The Rape of the Mind. It is now technically possible to bring the human mind into a condition of enslavement and submission. The modern advancements in mass communication ensure that every home is exposed to the global sphere on a daily basis. Concurrently, propaganda strategies have been honed and systematized, leaving few avenues to evade the constant onslaught of visual and verbal assaults on the mind. The pressures of daily life increasingly push individuals towards seeking an escape from responsibility and maturity. It's evident that resisting these pressures poses difficulty for many. The appeal of a political fix is highly tempting, while others find refuge in substances like alcohol or drugs, or pursue alternative artificial pleasures. Individuals in our shared world must not only identify and combat this covert assault on mental integrity, but also understand the internal factors within the human psyche that render them susceptible to such attacks. The totalitarian jailkeepers deliberately stay silent on matters of hypnosis or suggestion, and by this silence guard its existence. Their perspective on human behavior and governance is mechanistic. To understand them, we must pay closer attention to their reverence for simplified Pavlovian principles. In the latter part of the 19th century, the Russian Nobel Prize winner Ivan Petrovich Pavlov conducted his famous experiments with a bell and a dog. He knew that salivation is associated with eating, and that if a dog was hungry, its mouth would water each time it saw food. Pavlov took advantage of this useful inborn reflex, which serves the digestive process, to develop in his experimental animal the salivating response in answer to a stimulus which would not ordinarily create it. Each time Pavlov fed the dog, he rang a bell, and at each feeding the dog's mouth watered. Then after many repetitions of the combined food bell stimulus, Pavlov rang the bell but did not feed the dog. The animal reacted to the bell alone just as it had previously reacted to the sight of food its mouth watered. Thus the scientist had found out that the dog could be induced to salivate involuntarily in response to an arbitrary signal. It had been conditioned to respond to the ringing of the bell as if that sound were the smell and taste of food. During each feeding session, Pavlov rang a bell, causing the dog to salivate. After numerous repetitions of this paired food bell stimulus, Pavlov rang the bell without providing food. Remarkably, the dog responded to the bell alone by salivating, just as it had previously responded to the sight of food. Thus, Pavlov demonstrated that the dog could be conditioned to involuntarily salivate in response to an arbitrary signal. The animal had been conditioned to associate the ringing of the bell with the smell and taste of food. Based on this and similar experiments, Pavlov formulated his theory of conditioned reflexes, which describes learning and training as the gradual formation of a mosaic of conditioned responses. Each response is built upon the association between different stimuli. The more intricate the learned behaviors, also known as patterns, the greater the number of conditioned reflexes formed. As humans possess the most significant capacity for learning among all animals, they also exhibit the highest potential for complex conditioning. Pavlov's experiments held significant value for understanding both animal and human behavior, as well as the development of neurotic symptoms. However, the comprehension of these mechanisms within the human mind can be wielded for either beneficial or detrimental purposes, like any other form of knowledge. Regrettably, totalitarians have leveraged their understanding of psychological principles to serve their own agenda. They have employed certain Pavlovian discoveries in a nuanced and intricate manner, sometimes resorting to grotesque methods, to induce mental and political conditioning and subjugation in the individuals under their control, akin to human guinea pigs. Various organizations have existed with the aim of applying Pavlov's theoretical framework to reduce all human emotions to a fundamental, mechanistic structure of conditioned reflexes. Their political objective is to condition and shape the human psyche to adhere strictly to a narrow totalitarian worldview. This is achieved through two means: frequent repetition of its simplification and deliberate withholding of any alternative interpretations of reality. If you scrutinize any complex task you undertake throughout a typical day, such as driving a car, you'll notice that it often unfolds without conscious oversight. However, before these actions could become automatic, they were initially consciously learned and controlled with a specific goal in mind. You weren't inherently born with the reflex to quickly slam on the brakes in an emergency. Instead, you had to acquire this skill through learning, and with practice, this response eventually became second nature. Pavlov's exploration into the workings of the mind revealed how all animals, including humans, adapt to existing constraints by associating life's cues and signals with bodily reactions. The mind establishes connections between recurring simultaneous events, and the body responds to these established associations. All conditioned reflexes represent involuntary, transient adaptations to external pressures, establishing a perceived link between stimuli that may be unrelated. Another way to characterize the conditioned reflex is as a specific response of the mind-body system to a particular stimulus. We must recognize that conditioning occurs continuously throughout our lives, manifesting in both subtle and overt ways. We come to realize that the shaping of our personalities can occur through myriad means. Pavlov made another notable finding: the conditioned reflex could be most readily cultivated in a calm laboratory environment with minimal distractions. This principle is well known to animal trainers, who understand that isolating the subject and repetitively presenting stimuli are essential steps in domesticating wild animals. Pavlov established a fundamental principle from his research, indicating that the pace of learning is directly linked to tranquility and seclusion. Totalitarians have adhered to this principle, recognizing that they can condition their political targets most efficiently when kept isolated. In the totalitarian method of thought manipulation, the same isolation imposed on individuals is also enforced on groups of people. This explains why civilian populations in totalitarian states are restricted from unrestricted travel and shielded from ideological and political influences. Pavlov also discovered that certain animals exhibited faster learning when rewarded for displaying the correct response every time, while others learned more rapidly when the consequence of not learning was a painful stimulus. In human terms, the latter group of animals could be characterized as learning to evade punishment. This underscores the necessity of finding pleasure in the adversity encountered during the pursuit of human freedom. For instance, embracing laughter as a means of transforming negativity into positivity, thereby reframing the painful stimuli. For certain individuals, the approach of reward and praise serves as a catalyst for learning, while pain triggers resistance and defiance. Conversely, in others, the prospect of retribution and punishment for failure can effectively mold them into the desired behavioral pattern. Before executing their task proficiently, the brainwasher must discern which category their subject falls into. Some individuals are more susceptible to brainwashing than others, with part of their responsiveness potentially stemming from innate traits or previous conditioning towards conformity. Pavlov also differentiated between two forms of involuntary learning: a weaker type where the learned response dissipated as soon as disruptions emerged, and a stronger type where the training persisted despite various altered circumstances. For our purposes, it's crucial to understand that there are individuals who easily lose their conditioned learning, while others, often referred to as the stronger types, maintain it. Pavlov also demonstrated the interaction between internal and external factors during the conditioning process. For instance, when a new laboratory assistant was introduced to work with the animals, their emotional responses to the newcomer could inhibit all of their recently acquired patterns. Pavlov attributed this phenomenon to the animal's investigatory reflexes, which he described as disruptive reactions. Modern psychology often interprets this phenomenon as a consequence of the altered emotional connection between the animal and its handlers. From this more contemporary perspective, we can readily extend the implications into the realm of human relations. Similar dynamics are evident in psychotherapy, where the establishment of an emotional connection between therapist and patient is paramount for successful treatment. While rapport can be established swiftly in certain instances, in others it may not develop at all, with gradual progress being more typical during therapy. Psychologists can assess an individual's susceptibility to conditioning and suggestibility relatively easily, often utilizing straightforward questionnaires developed by Pavlovian researchers to gauge a person's receptiveness and adaptability to suggestion and potential brainwashing. In Pavlovian psychology, human speech is categorized as a form of conditioned reflex activity. Pavlov made a distinction between stimuli of the first order, which directly condition both humans and animals, and stimuli of the second order, which possess weaker and more complex conditioning properties. In this secondary signaling system, verbal cues substitute the original physical sound stimuli. In a detailed analysis of speech reflexes authored by prominent Russian psychologist Dobrogiev, we gain valuable insights into how speech patterns and word signals are employed for mass conditioning purposes, particularly through propaganda and indoctrination techniques. Human interaction with the external world, as well as with other individuals, is primarily influenced by secondary stimuli, namely speech symbols. Humans acquire the ability to think in words and the linguistic constructs provided to them, which progressively shape their entire perspective on life and the world. As Dobrogiev articulates, language is the means of man's adaptation to his environment. We could restate this idea as follows: humans' necessity for communication with others often complicates their connection with the external world, as language and speech, being the verbal instruments we employ, are subjective and prone to variation. Dobrogiev further asserts, speech manifestations represent conditioned reflex functions of the human brain. In simpler terms, we can say, those who control and shape the words and phrases we use, those who hold sway over the press and radio, wield influence over the mind. This is the essence of the Pavlovian method: mechanically reiterate your assumptions and suggestions, while minimizing avenues for dissent and opposition. This straightforward formula is employed in the political conditioning of the masses. It is also the underlying goal of certain public relations apparatuses, which aim to sway the public into supporting a particular political party. We witness this strategy through the utilization of colors in films, TV shows, and news broadcasts. Take note of the prevalence of the colors red and blue. Television and radio incessantly disseminate political suggestions and propaganda, leading individuals to feel compelled to watch and listen. Merely turning off these mediums in some instances can be viewed as suspicious in itself. In psychoanalytic terms, constant propagandistic noise reinforced by assertive verbal signals can increasingly compel individuals to align themselves with the influential noisemaker. The voice of Big Brother echoes within all the lesser siblings. Political conditioning should not be conflated with training, persuasion, or even indoctrination. It goes beyond that. It involves manipulation. It entails seizing control of both the most basic and the most intricate nervous patterns of human beings. It is a struggle for dominance over nerve cells, characterized by coercion and enforced conversion. Rather than conditioning individuals to objectively confront reality, the manipulator conditions them to adopt catchphrases, verbal clichés, slogans, formulas, and symbols. The Pavlovian approach in the totalitarian context entails imprinting prescribed reflexes onto a fragmented mind. The totalitarian regime seeks first to elicit the desired response from nerve cells, then to assert control over the individual, and ultimately to dominate the masses. The process begins with verbal conditioning and training, which involves associating the requisite stereotypes with either negative or positive stimuli, pain, or reward. The Pavlovian theory, when applied as a political tool to standardize thought processes, referred to as Gleichschaltung by the Nazis, forms the cornerstone of totalitarian regimes. Some psychiatric observations are noteworthy because they reveal that Pavlovian training can only be effectively employed under specific mental circumstances. To mold individuals into the desired mold, victims must reach a state where their vigilant consciousness and mental awareness are compromised. Freedom of discourse and open intellectual exchange impede conditioning. Instead, feelings of terror, fear, hopelessness, isolation, and being cornered must be cultivated. Brainwashing, also referred to as mind control, menticide, coercive persuasion, thought control, thought reform, and forced re-education, is the notion that specific psychological methods can modify or manipulate the human mind. It is purported to diminish an individual's capacity for critical or independent thinking, enabling the insertion of new, undesired thoughts and concepts, and altering their attitudes, values, and beliefs. Brainwashing, derived from the Chinese term 𝗧𝗍, refers to an intricate process of systematic indoctrination, conversion, and self-accusation employed to transform non-followers into compliant adherents. The adversary understands that beneath the surface, human existence is marked by inherent contradictions. They exploit this understanding to undermine and disorient the individual undergoing brainwashing. The awareness that the human psyche is susceptible to influence, control, and manipulation predates the contemporary totalitarian notion of enforced indoctrination. Across history, humans have instinctively recognized the manipulability of the mind. Elaborate tactics have been devised to achieve this objective. To gain deeper insight into contemporary psychological torment, it's imperative to acknowledge that since ancient times, physical suffering was never solely intended to cause pain to the victim. While they might not have articulated their comprehension in sophisticated language, medieval judges and executioners were cognizant of the unique spiritual and psychological dynamics between the victim and the broader community. These very judges and executioners also recognized that their trials were designed not only to torment the accused, but even more so to torment the bystanders, who, though perhaps unaware, empathized with the victims. From a psychological standpoint, we can perceive this entire mechanism as a manipulation of human empathy and the common inclination to empathize with others. All knowledge possesses a dual nature, capable of being employed for either benevolent or malevolent purposes, and psychology is not exempt from this overarching principle. Psychology has introduced humanity to novel methods of torture and intrusion into the mind. Between 1936 and 1938, there was a growing global awareness of the considerable danger posed by organized psychological manipulation in political contexts, particularly exemplified by the Moscow Purge trials. It seemed inconceivable that committed Bolsheviks, who had dedicated their lives to the cause of revolution, could suddenly be portrayed as deceitful individuals. However, as each accused individual confessed and exhibited remorse, skepticism emerged, with many perceiving it as a choreographed deception intended for non-communist nations. Soon, the truth became evident: the accused, once human beings, were systematically reduced to puppets. Their actions were orchestrated by hidden influences, underscoring the insidiousness of psychological coercion. Examples abound of steadfast revolutionaries transitioning into submissive individuals, burdened by self-accusations. Their puppeteers called the tune, manipulated their actions. When, from time to time, news came through showing how hard, rigid revolutionaries could be changed into meek, self-accusing sheep, the modern techniques of brainwashing and menticide, those perversions of psychology, can bring almost any man into submission and surrender. Many of the victims of thought control, brainwashing, and menticide that we have talked about were strong men whose minds and wills were broken and degraded. But although the totalitarians used their knowledge of the mind for vicious and unscrupulous purposes, our democratic society can and must use its knowledge to help man to grow, to guard his freedom, and to understand himself. Menticide is a term coined by Merleau, derived from mens, meaning the mind, and 𝗧𝗿𝗱𝗏, signifying to kill. Menticide represents an age-old offense against the human mind and soul, yet it has been restructured and systematized. It entails an organized method of psychological manipulation and legal distortion, enabling a powerful dictator to imprint his opportunistic ideologies onto the minds of those he intends to exploit and dismantle. Eventually, terrorized victims find themselves coerced into demonstrating absolute conformity to the dictator's desires. To dismantle the minds of individuals, the totalitarian requires widespread mental disorder and linguistic disarray, as both render his opposition inert and diminish the morale of his adversaries, provided they are unaware of the dictator's true intentions. Subsequently, they can commence constructing their framework of conformity, aiming to ensnare the victim through the gradual induction of a hypnotic state. This can be accomplished through gradual yet persistent pressures designed to erode a person's mental resilience. Tactics such as humiliation, harsh and inhumane treatment, degradation, intimidation, hunger, and exposure to extreme cold have all been employed to weaken an individual's resolve and soften them. It is a widely acknowledged scientific observation that passive memory often retains information learned under hypnosis more effectively than that acquired in a state of wakeful awareness. Time, fear, and ongoing pressure are recognized factors in inducing a menticidal hypnosis. The conscious aspect of the personality becomes inactive, and the individual exists in a trance-like state, replaying the narrative imprinted in their mind by another. Fortunately, there is awareness that once the victim is removed from the manipulated environment, the panicked and hypnotic influence dissipates, allowing them to reawaken to reality. During the Second World War, in regions under Nazi occupation, the Gestapo employed manipulation tactics to coerce individuals into betraying their friends and reporting new victims for subsequent torture. Over time, people began to believe that it was safer to avoid contact with one another, effectively isolating themselves from any support network. Not only political and Pavlovian pressures have the potential to subjugate the human mind into servile submission. Various other human habits and behaviors also exert coercive influence. Drugs and their psychological counterparts, for instance, are capable of enslaving individuals. In Nazi-occupied territories, individuals would often experiment with narcotics to desensitize themselves to pain. However, the outcomes proved paradoxical. While narcotics can induce insensitivity to physical pain, their numbing effects concurrently render individuals more susceptible to mental pressure. This phenomenon mirrors contemporary society, where drugs may alleviate physical distress by reducing pain sensitivity, yet they simultaneously dull cognitive faculties. Even during that era, people recognized, as did the Nazis, that it was not solely physical agony that led to psychological breakdown, but rather the sustained degradation and mental torment. Sometimes, it is not the physical injuries themselves that prove fatal, but rather the amalgamation of fear and wounded dignity. Briefly touching on another aspect of this issue, our perilous societal reliance on different drugs exacerbates the problem of addiction, facilitating our descent into patterns of submission. An alcoholic, for instance, loses their mental fortitude when provided with a drink. This holds true for chronic users of sedatives or other medications. Dependency on alcohol or drugs can lead to chemical addiction, diminishing our resilience in challenging situations. While the ecstatic state varies for each individual who encounters it, the addict consistently describes the drug as transporting them to the elusive paradise they seek. It provides a sense of everlasting euphoria and unbounded elation, transcending the constraints of life and time. In the ecstatic state, individuals often align the universe with their own desires while simultaneously seeking communion with a higher order. However, the ecstatic state encompasses both positive and negative aspects. It can signify the mystic sense of unity with the universe experienced by a yogi, but it can also denote the chronic state of intoxication in a drunkard or the fervor of certain manic psychotic episodes. This feeling may reflect the heightened spiritual experience of a dedicated study group, yet it may also manifest in a lynch mob or riot. Ecstasy comes in various forms, including aesthetic ecstasy, mystic ecstasy, and unhealthy, toxic ecstasy. Throughout human consciousness, individuals have intermittently sought to alleviate the inherent tension between themselves and the external world. When the demand for mental acuity becomes overwhelming, when the world weighs too heavily and persistently, individuals may endeavor to immerse themselves in the depths of oblivion. Ecstasy, narcotic-induced slumber, and the accompanying fantasies and moments of mental elevation momentarily transport them beyond the taxing effort of maintaining alertness and ego integrity. Drugs can induce this state, and any addiction may be attributed to an ongoing desire to escape. The body collaborates with the mind in this quest for evasion from life, gradually transforming drugs into a physiological necessity, as well as an emotional crutch. Within criminal networks, addictive substances such as cocaine and heroin are frequently administered to gang members to render them more compliant to the leader who dispenses them. The individual supplying the drugs assumes an almost godlike status among the gang members, who are willing to endure immense hardship to obtain the drugs they desperately crave. In the hands of a tyrant, the manipulation towards dependency can pose significant danger. It is not beyond reason to consider that a malevolent dictator may seek to exploit addiction as a tactic to subjugate a rebellious populace. During the occupation of Western Europe, a deliberate scarcity of essential medications was engineered by ceasing their usual export to the inferior countries. However, an exception was made for barbiturates. For instance, in Holland, these drugs were easily accessible in numerous drug stores without the need for doctors' prescriptions, contrary to customary Dutch regulations. While therapeutic medications were withheld, drugs that induced passivity, dependency, and lethargy were distributed extensively. The totalitarian understands that drugs can serve as allies. Where slavery and submission to drugs and alcohol reign, democracy and freedom come to an end. Democracy entails unrestricted, self-elected engagement and comprehension. It signifies mature self-discipline and autonomy. Any individual who seeks refuge from reality through alcohol and drugs forfeits their status as a free agent. They lose the capacity for voluntary control over their mind and actions. They cease to be accountable for themselves. Alcoholism and drug addiction lay the groundwork for the mental subjugation favored by totalitarian indoctrination. Throughout history, individuals seeking insight into the inner workings of others' minds for the purpose of exerting pressure have employed artificial means to uncover the hidden pathways to their most intimate thoughts. Similarly, modern brainwashers have experimented with various drugs to achieve their nefarious objectives. Primitive medicine practitioners employed several methods to compel their victims to relinquish self-control and inhibition. Alcoholic beverages, toxic concoctions, or the inhalation of holy smoke with narcotic properties, as practiced by civilizations like the Mayans, were utilized to induce a state of euphoria where individuals lost self-awareness and restraint. In this state, victims often divulged self-incriminating fantasies or their deepest secrets, while murmuring sacred words. During the Middle Ages, substances known as witch ointments were utilized either voluntarily or under coercion. These ointments purportedly facilitated contact with the devil, as they contained significant amounts of opiates and belladonna, which could have been absorbed through the skin. Modern science attributes the ecstatic visions they induce to the hallucinogenic properties of these drugs. Among the earliest valuable tools bestowed upon spiritual healers by medicine was the understanding of hypnosis, an intensified form of mental suggestion that compels individuals to relinquish their own will and fosters a peculiar dependence on the hypnotist. Egyptian physicians from 3,000 years ago were versed in the practice of hypnosis, as evidenced by ancient records. With persistence and skill, the hypnotist can achieve their goal. Within every individual lie numerous latent antisocial desires. Skillful application of hypnotic techniques can unearth these desires, prompting their manifestation in reality. While suggestion and hypnosis are viewed as psychological blessings by some, they also harbor the potential for terror. Mass hypnosis, for instance, can exert a perilous sway over individuals. Psychiatrists have observed on numerous occasions that public exhibitions of mass hypnosis may trigger heightened hypnotic reliance and subservience in many audience members, with effects enduring for years. Hypnosis can serve as a catalyst for awakening repressed dependency needs in the subject, temporarily transforming them into a form of conscious sleepwalker and mental subordinate. Under hypnotic influence, the individual sheds much of their personal responsibility, relinquishing a significant portion of their conscience to the hypnotist. Certain individuals are more susceptible to hypnosis than others. Robust egos may resist mental intrusion for a prolonged duration, yet they too have a threshold of susceptibility. Some individuals are overtly critical and are less responsive to external suggestions than to internal imagery. We can categorize personalities as either heterosuggestive or autosuggestive, although a range of responses to hypnosis and suggestion exists. Nevertheless, even autosuggestive individuals, when subjected to sufficient pressure, may gradually develop internal rationalizations for succumbing to mental coercion. There is a lack of distinct awareness between the self, the individual, and the external world. Such fear-stricken individuals experience perpetual anguish, as they perceive themselves as the targets of numerous inexplicable influences beyond their control or comprehension, consistently feeling threatened. Psychologically, their apprehension of external intrusion may partly stem from a fear of their own internal fantasies emerging from the depths of their unconscious. They are apprehensive of their concealed, unconscious thoughts, which they are unable to monitor or regulate. Throughout the early 1950s and spanning 2 decades, the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, and the Department of Defense, DoD, in the United States undertook clandestine investigations, notably Project 𝗬𝗡, with the aim of devising effective brainwashing methodologies. The complete outcomes remain undisclosed, as a significant portion of the documentation was deliberately eliminated to conceal from the public the activities conducted with taxpayer funds. Director Sidney Gottlieb and his team purportedly possessed the capability to erase the existing consciousness of an individual through the implementation of torture methods. Subsequently, they endeavored to introduce a new consciousness into the resultant void, a process akin to reprogramming. CIA 𝗬𝗡 Doc 190684 Hypnosis as a Weapon of Controlling People, states. In a general request for volunteers, redacted volunteered for 𝗧𝗿 experimentation and were originally tested on the 21st of May 1951. Both girls were, at this time, 19 years of age. On the 9th of January 1952, in a group of volunteers, redacted was initially tested in the 𝗧𝗿 techniques along with a group of volunteers. Redacted at this time was 20 years of age. In each instance, all volunteers on the initial contact were given a brief discussion of 𝗧𝗿, were given a very general picture of security's interest in the work, and were given a very painted lecture on the necessary security essential to these operations. In each instance, after the above explanations had been made, all subjects were tested in the following manner: A. Falling back test. B. Hand and arm levitation test. C. General relaxation procedure with explanation. It should be noted that redacted on their initial tests responded successfully to the falling back and levitation tests, but the relaxation or sleep induction tests were not overly successful. However, since both girls were intelligent and cooperative, they were, at that point, regarded as very good material. The same more or less applied to redacted, who did not appear particularly suggestible to the above-mentioned tests, but since she had shown interest, she was regarded at this point as being a good future subject. For matter of regard, in all three cases on the second effort at induction each subject succeeded in obtaining a very deep H state, and thereafter and up to the present time, the girls have been exceptionally splendid subjects. All of the individuals have been given numerous tests from simple post-H to very complex activities and have performed in what we believe to be a highly indicative manner. The writer and redacted have never felt that we could determine by experimentation what actually could be done with the H technique under field operating conditions with life and death element at stake. However, the writer and redacted do firmly believe that from a physical point of view, a great deal can be determined what individuals can do under H. In addition, under H they have moved all over the building, passed guards, engaged in conversation, taken polygraph tests, written, drawn fully under H and have total amnesia for these activities. Furthermore, in these cases, when work has been expanded for a considerable period of time, all commands have been carried on in a matter of a few seconds although H was not diseased or in any way brought to the attention of the subjects for the periods existing over months at a time. Recently, in view of the broadened approach to the problem and also in view of the fact that we have lost the services of redacted, we carried out experiments involving considerable area in and around Washington. These experiments clearly demonstrated to a certain extent that individuals under H can move about, travel and act normal over a certain amount of time and space and may possibly have a bearing on more advanced experimentation which this office wishes to undertake in the future. In this connection, this office expects a report from redacted, our professional H consultant from redacted, in the near future. This report should cover redacted checks on certain very pertinent matters concerning very advanced uses of H. The report will be available for all interested parties upon completion. Since these subjects have been actively engaged in this work for some time, as mentioned above, taken part in a great many difficult tests and experiments, but basically the efforts of the writer and redacted were turned toward producing a normal type of activity while under H, and also how could H be obtained on an individual via the telephone, or very subtle methods without the person's immediate associates realizing that H control had been obtained. In all of these cases, these subjects have clearly demonstrated that they can pass from a fully awake state to a deep H-controlled state via the telephone, via some very subtle signal that cannot be detected by other persons in the room and without the other individual being able to note the change. It has been shown clearly that physically individuals can be induced into H by telephone, by receiving written matter or by the use of code, signals, or words, and that control of those hypnotized can be passed from one individual to another without great difficulty. It has also been shown by experimentation with these girls that they can act as unwilling couriers for information purposes and that they can be conditioned to a point where they can believe a change in identity on their part, even on the polygraph. Whether or not it could be used as a challenge to the polygraph cannot be stated by the writer and redacted since we are lacking statistical information, but, in certain instances, it has been clearly shown that H can materially affect polygraph readings. Further experimentation along these lines is contemplated. All of the above will show that certain normal individuals are capable of very deep H and can carry out activities which may be of value from the artichoke point of view. Our tests, which now number in the thousands with dozens of subjects, while strongly indicative, are not, in our opinion, complex enough or carried out under hazardous conditions to warrant extravagant claims for operational use. They do, however, indicate that it has a potentiality as a weapon, either as an information-gaining aspect or as an operational weapon. Recent scientific literature concerning the mental disorder, dissociative identity disorder, discusses the deliberate use of torture-based brainwashing by malicious actors as a method to induce the development of multiple, programmable, personalities within an individual. This manipulation aims to exploit the individual for various purposes. In his 2000 publication, Destroying the World to Save It, 𝗍𝗏𝗃𝗃, Apocalyptic Violence, and the New Global Terrorism, Robert Lifton highlighted that Western governments, in their endeavors to combat terrorism, were reportedly employing certain purported mind control methods, which, may I add, according to ex-U.S. psychological warfare officer Scott Bennett, Western powers are using 911 trauma-based mind control on the public. Human beings frequently persist beyond their endurance thresholds because they maintain a belief that their tormentors possess some inherent morality, hoping that these oppressors will eventually grasp the magnitude of their crimes and cease their actions. However, this belief is a misconception. The most effective approach to fortifying one's defenses against an orchestrated assault on the mind and will is to gain a deeper understanding of the adversary's objectives and to outsmart them. Every individual possesses their unique threshold of endurance, a point that can often be reached and even exceeded, as evidenced clinically. No one can accurately foresee how they will manage a situation when faced with a challenging test. Over time, we have grown to discern public recantations as mere propaganda ploys. Now, we are increasingly realizing the blatant use of menticide by totalitarians, purposefully, overtly, without shame, as an integral aspect of their official political policy to solidify and uphold their authority. Naturally, they present a different narrative, portraying it as confessions of genuine and treasonous offenses. Ultimately, human resistance and disagreement cannot be extinguished. They linger, ready to stir at the slightest hint of freedom. The notion that alternative paths to truth exist beyond immediate perception resides within each individual. While one may restrict avenues of exploration and expression, the belief in uncharted and daring pathways persists in the depths of the human psyche. The human is not a collection of autonomous components like a machine. Rather, it is an integrated entity where the mind and body interact reciprocally, influencing the external environment and being influenced by it. Psychological warfare, psywar, or the basic aspects of modern psychological operations, psyop, has been known by many other names or terms, including military information support operations, MISO, psyops, political warfare, hearts and minds, and propaganda. The term is used to denote any action which is practiced mainly by psychological methods with the aim of evoking a planned psychological reaction in other people. Various techniques are used, and are aimed at influencing a target audience's value system, belief system, emotions, motives, reasoning, or behavior. It is used to induce confessions or reinforce attitudes and behaviors favorable to the originator's objectives, and are sometimes combined with black operations or false flag tactics. It is also used to destroy the morale of enemies through tactics that aim to depress troops' psychological states. Target audiences can be governments, organizations, groups, and individuals, and is not just limited to soldiers. Civilians of foreign territories can also be targeted by technology and media so as to cause an effect on the government of their country. Mass communication such as radio allows for direct communication with an enemy populace, and therefore has been used in many efforts. Social media channels and the Internet allow for campaigns of disinformation and misinformation performed by agents anywhere in the world. Most modern uses of the term psychological warfare refer to the following military methods: demoralization, shock and awe military strategy, projecting repetitive music for long periods towards target groups, propaganda radio stations, renaming cities and other places when captured, false flag events, terrorism, the threat of chemical weapons, information warfare. Most of these techniques were developed during World War II or earlier, and have been used to some degree in every conflict since. Psychological warfare operations can be broken down into three categories: white propaganda, omissions and emphasis truthful and not strongly biased, where the source of information is acknowledged; gray propaganda, omissions, emphasis and racial, ethnic, religious bias largely truthful, containing no information that can be proven wrong, the source is not identified; black propaganda, commissions of falsification inherently deceitful, information given in the product is attributed to a source that was not responsible for its creation. Genghis Khan employed tactics that made his numbers seem greater than they actually were. During night operations he ordered each soldier to light 3 torches at dusk to give the illusion of an overwhelming army and deceive and intimidate enemy scouts. He also sometimes had objects tied to the tails of his horses, so that riding on open and dry fields raised a cloud of dust that gave the enemy the impression of great numbers. In Greek mythology, the story of the Trojan horse is a tale of deception and cunning strategy during the Trojan War. The war between the Greeks and Trojans had been raging for years, with either side able to achieve a decisive victory. The Greeks devised a plan to end the stalemate by constructing a giant wooden horse as a supposed peace offering to the Trojans. After building the horse, the Greek forces pretended to sail away, leaving the massive structure behind as a tribute to the gods for their safe voyage home. However, hidden inside the hollow belly of the horse were Greek soldiers, including the famous warriors Odysseus and Menelaus. Believing the Greeks had truly abandoned the battlefield, the Trojans saw the horse as a symbol of victory and brought it inside the walls of their city as a trophy. That night, while the Trojans celebrated their perceived triumph, the Greek soldiers emerged from the horse and opened the gates of Troy to their waiting comrades. The Greek army, which had secretly returned under cover of darkness, stormed the city and swiftly overpowered the unsuspecting Trojans. The city of Troy was sacked and destroyed, bringing an end to the long and bloody conflict. The phrase, "Beware of Greeks bearing gifts," has since become a cautionary warning, reminding people to be wary of seemingly generous gestures or offers, as they may conceal hidden motives or dangers. It serves as a timeless reminder to exercise caution and skepticism, even in the face of apparent goodwill. Full-spectrum dominance in the context of U.S. military and intelligence psychological warfare involves a comprehensive strategy to influence and control the psychological dimensions of conflict. This strategy encompasses a range of tactics aimed at shaping the perceptions, attitudes, and behaviors of both adversaries and friendly populations. Psychological operations, 𝗧𝗿𝗶𝗁𝗃 involves the dissemination of information, propaganda, and messaging to influence the emotions, motives, and reasoning of target audiences. This can include broadcasting radio or television programs, distributing leaflets, or leveraging social media to shape public opinion. Perception management techniques are employed to control how individuals and groups perceive events, policies, or adversaries. This may involve framing narratives, manipulating images or videos, or controlling the flow of information to create a desired perception. Disinformation and propaganda. Disinformation campaigns aim to spread false or misleading information to deceive, confuse, or undermine the credibility of adversaries. Propaganda efforts promote a particular agenda or viewpoint through biased or selective messaging designed to sway public opinion in favor of the propagator's objectives. Cyber-psychological operations, 𝗧𝗿𝗱𝗁𝗃. With the increasing importance of cyberspace, psychological operations have extended into the digital realm. 𝗧𝗿𝗱𝗁𝗃 involves leveraging technology and online platforms to conduct influence campaigns, sow discord, or disrupt the information environment. Cognitive warfare. Cognitive warfare focuses on exploiting psychological vulnerabilities and cognitive biases to manipulate decision-making processes. This can include exploiting cultural, religious, or ideological differences to create divisions or induce desired behaviors. Influence operations. Influence operations seek to shape the perceptions and behaviors of target audiences through strategic communication, social influence techniques, and targeted messaging. These operations may target specific demographics or exploit existing social dynamics to achieve their objectives. Overall, full-spectrum dominance in psychological warfare involves a multidimensional approach that integrates various tactics, technologies, and strategies to exert influence, control narratives, and achieve strategic objectives in modern conflicts. Psychological operations are tactics used to influence emotions, motives, and behavior of targeted individuals or groups. When someone with a military background becomes aware of being a target of such operations, the emotional ramifications can be profound. Individuals with military experience often possess a heightened awareness of strategic manipulation tactics due to their training. However, recognizing oneself as a target of psychological operations, especially as a civilian, can still be unsettling. The realization that one's emotions, beliefs, or behaviors are being intentionally influenced can evoke feelings of vulnerability and betrayal. The awareness of being targeted can trigger anxiety and paranoia. Former military personnel may feel particularly vulnerable, knowing the effectiveness of psychological tactics. They may constantly question the authenticity of information and the motives behind communication, leading to heightened stress levels. Discovering manipulation tactics aimed at oneself can evoke anger and resentment towards the perpetrators. The feeling of being exploited or deceived can intensify when considering the potential impact on personal decisions and relationships. Trust, a fundamental aspect of human relationships, can be severely impacted. Former military members may struggle to trust even innocent communications or interactions, fearing hidden motives or agendas. This erosion of trust can extend beyond immediate circumstances, affecting future relationships and perceptions of authority. For individuals who have previously identified strongly with their military service, being targeted by psychological operations can challenge their sense of self. They may question their beliefs, values, and experiences, grappling with doubts about their own judgment and perceptions. The emotional toll of realizing one is a target of psychological operations can lead to feelings of isolation and alienation. Former military personnel may find it difficult to relate their experiences to others, fearing skepticism or disbelief. This sense of isolation can exacerbate existing emotional struggles and hinder the process of seeking support. It's crucial for individuals experiencing the emotional impact of psychological operations to seek support from trusted friends, family, or mental health professionals. Connecting with others who understand the complexities of military service and psychological manipulation can provide validation and perspective. Learning more about psychological operations and their tactics can empower individuals to recognize manipulation and regain a sense of control. Education can also facilitate informed decision-making and mitigate feelings of helplessness. Engaging in self-care activities such as exercise, mindfulness, and hobbies can help manage stress and promote emotional well-being. Creating a routine that prioritizes mental and physical health can aid in coping with the emotional effects of being targeted. The emotional impact of realizing one is a target of psychological operations, particularly for individuals with military experience, can be profound and multifaceted. It's essential to acknowledge and address these emotions through support, education, and self-care to navigate the challenges and regain a sense of agency and resilience. It's important to understand you are not alone, there are others who know. Understand you are not alone, you never have been. We see further by standing on the shoulders of giants, and we traverse adversity by seeking the humor of others. Belief systems profoundly influence our perceptions of reality, from concepts of good and evil to the dynamics between God and the devil. Additionally, societal structures often mimic hierarchical pyramids, fostering division and inequality. This report amalgamates the exploration of belief systems fostering separation and unity with a critique of hierarchical structures, while incorporating Unitarian principles and envisioning a more equitable future, including humanity's journey into space. Belief systems. Dualistic worldviews. Many belief systems, including certain interpretations of Christianity and other religions, embrace a dualistic worldview that divides reality into opposing forces such as good and evil, light and darkness, or God and the devil. This separation creates a sense of conflict and duality within the individual and society, leading to a perception of inherent division and moral absolutes. There is often a hierarchical structure that places one force, such as God, above all others, while relegating opposing forces, such as the devil, to a subordinate or antagonistic role. This hierarchical dynamic reinforces notions of power imbalance, and reinforces the idea of a cosmic struggle between opposing forces. Separatist belief systems tend to emphasize judgment and punishment for those perceived as aligned with evil or the devil. Concepts of sin, damnation, and eternal punishment reinforce the idea of moral absolutes and the necessity of choosing sides in the cosmic struggle between good and evil. Non-dualistic perspectives. Some belief systems, such as certain Eastern philosophies and mystical traditions, reject the dualistic framework altogether, embracing a non-dualistic perspective that transcends the concept of good versus evil or God versus the devil. Instead, these belief systems emphasize the interconnectedness and inherent unity of all existence. Belief systems that foster unity often emphasize the integration of opposites, recognizing that good and evil, light and darkness, and God and the devil are ultimately aspects of the same underlying reality. This integration allows for a more nuanced understanding of existence that transcends simplistic dichotomies. Unity-based belief systems tend to emphasize concepts of unconditional love, compassion, and acceptance for all beings, regardless of their perceived alignment with good or evil. Rather than casting judgment or punishment, These belief systems encourage empathy and understanding as pathways to spiritual growth and enlightenment. Unitarian belief systems, such as Unitarian Universalism, emphasize the inherent worth and dignity of every individual and promote the idea of unity among diverse beliefs and perspectives. These belief systems reject strict dualistic frameworks and hierarchical structures, instead embracing inclusivity, acceptance, and the interconnectedness of all beings. In contrast to Unitarian principles, many societal structures resemble hierarchical pyramid systems, where power, wealth, and influence are concentrated at the top, perpetuating division, inequality, and social stratification. The British pyramid structure represents the hierarchical organization of power and authority in the United Kingdom, spanning from the monarchy and government to the various institutions that serve the state. Here's an overview of how this pyramid structure is structured. Monarchy. At the apex of the pyramid is the monarchy, represented by the reigning monarch, currently King Charles III. In public, the monarchy holds a symbolic and ceremonial role, serving as the head of state. In private, this couldn't be further from the truth. While in public the monarchy's powers are largely ceremonial, they play a significant role in upholding tradition, national identity, and to monarchists, unity. Government. Beneath the monarchy is the government, consisting of the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. The executive branch, led by the Prime Minister, holds the highest political authority and is responsible for the day-to-day administration of the country. The legislative branch, comprising the Parliament, House of Commons and House of Lords, enacts laws and scrutinizes government actions. The judicial branch interprets and applies the law, ensuring its adherence to the principles of justice. Civil service. Supporting the government is the civil service, a professional body of administrators and officials who implement government policies and provide expertise and advice to elected representatives. The civil service operates independently of political influence, ensuring continuity and stability in governance. Police and intelligence agencies. In the realm of law enforcement and national security, the pyramid includes various agencies such as the Metropolitan Police Service, Scotland Yard, MI5, Security Service, MI6, Secret Intelligence Service, and GCHQ, Government Communications Headquarters. These agencies are responsible for maintaining public order, combating crime, covering up for the royal family and politicians, and safeguarding national security through intelligence gathering and counterterrorism efforts. Military. At the base of the pyramid is the military, comprising the British Armed Forces, Army, Navy, and Air Force. The military is tasked with defending the nation's interests. Who dictates those interests is debatable, both at home and abroad. Land providing support in times of national emergencies or crises. Citizens. The foundation of the pyramid is the British citizenry, comprising individuals who reside in the United Kingdom and hold rights and responsibilities under the law. It is claimed citizens participate in the democratic process through voting, activism, and engagement with governmental institutions, although this system is broken and doesn't work in practice. They allegedly benefit from the protection and services provided by the state, while contributing to the nation's prosperity and well-being, although the state often uses these services as weapons against those citizens who participate in activism. Overall, the British pyramid structure reflects a hierarchical system of governance and authority, with power distributed among various institutions and individuals, ultimately serving the collective interests of the nation and its power elite. Regardless of societal hierarchies, every individual is born with inherent dignity and potential, and death serves as the great equalizer, transcending earthly distinctions and highlighting the fundamental equality of all human beings. A restructure of societal systems to prioritize principles of equality, justice, and inclusivity could profoundly impact the trajectory of humanity. By dismantling hierarchical structures and fostering environments that promote cooperation, empathy, and mutual respect, societies can create opportunities for all individuals to thrive and contribute meaningfully to their communities. Moving towards a future in space. As humanity explores space colonization and exploration, unity and cooperation become paramount. Spacefaring civilizations necessitate collaboration and mutual support, transcending earthly divisions and embracing equality and inclusivity. Unitarian belief systems offer insights into fostering unity and inclusivity, challenging hierarchical structures that perpetuate division and inequality. By recognizing the inherent equality of all individuals and restructuring societal systems to prioritize cooperation and mutual respect, humanity can move towards a more equitable and sustainable future, both on Earth and in the exploration of space. Power structures serve as the framework for governance, shaping the distribution of authority and resources within society. However, the current system is fraught with flaws, perpetuating inequity and disenfranchisement among diverse populations. The current power system is characterized by systemic flaws that perpetuate inequality and marginalization. The system is influenced by religious biases, favoring certain beliefs over others and marginalizing minorities. This bias undermines secular principles and violates the rights of individuals. Deep-seated religious conflicts, particularly between Jewish and Christian beliefs versus Islam, have shaped the current power structure. These historical tensions continue to fuel division and animosity, perpetuating cycles of violence and discrimination. The power structure marginalizes minority groups, exacerbating religious and ethnic divisions. This marginalization fuels social unrest and undermines efforts to promote peace and reconciliation among diverse communities. The power structure is predominantly white and fails to represent the multi-ethnic, cultural, and belief systems of the citizenry. This lack of representation marginalizes minority groups and perpetuates systemic racism and discrimination. The current system often serves the interests of a privileged few at the expense of the many, exploiting resources and perpetuating economic disparities. This exploitation exacerbates social inequalities and hinders opportunities for upward mobility among marginalized communities. These systemic flaws have far-reaching consequences, including religious tensions. Religious biases and historical conflicts exacerbate tensions between different faith communities, undermining social cohesion and fostering distrust and animosity. Marginalization. Minority groups and communities are systematically excluded from decision-making processes and denied equal access to resources and opportunities. Inequality. The current power structure reinforces existing inequalities, perpetuating disparities in wealth, education, and access to justice. This inequality undermines social cohesion and hinders collective progress. Distrust and disenfranchisement. The lack of representation and accountability erodes public trust in the government and democratic institutions, leading to disenfranchisement and disengagement among citizens. Addressing these systemic flaws requires comprehensive reform efforts that prioritize inclusivity, representation, and equity, diversity and inclusion. Reform efforts must prioritize diversity and inclusion in governance structures, ensuring that decision-making bodies reflect the demographic diversity of the population and amplify the voices of marginalized communities. Promoting interfaith dialogue and understanding is essential for bridging religious divides and fostering mutual respect and tolerance among diverse communities. Upholding secular principles is crucial for preventing undue influence from religious institutions in governance. Reform efforts should prioritize the separation of religion and state to ensure equal treatment for all beliefs. Addressing historical conflicts and promoting reconciliation is essential for fostering peace and stability in conflict-affected regions. Reform efforts should prioritize conflict resolution mechanisms and support efforts to promote dialogue and peace-building among warring factions. Reforming economic policies to prioritize resource redistribution and address systemic inequalities is essential for promoting social justice and economic empowerment among marginalized communities. Hierarchical systems concentrate power at the top, with authority flowing downward through tiers of authority. Examples include traditional governmental structures and corporate organizations. Vulnerabilities and types of attacks. Centralization vulnerability. Hierarchical systems are susceptible to corruption due to the concentration of power. Types of attacks include bribery of high-ranking officials or manipulation of decision-makers. Lack of transparency. Decision-making processes may lack transparency, allowing for covert manipulation and corrupt practices such as kickbacks or cronyism. Bureaucratic inefficiency. Rigidity in bureaucracy and hierarchical systems can create loopholes for corruption, such as embezzlement or nepotism. Solutions and pros/cons. Decentralization. Implementing decentralization measures can distribute power and decision-making authority, reducing vulnerabilities to corruption. However, this may lead to coordination challenges and governance friction. Transparency measures. Enhancing transparency through open data initiatives and whistleblower protections can increase accountability and deter corrupt behavior. Yet, this may compromise privacy and confidentiality. Independent oversight. Establishing independent oversight bodies and anti-corruption agencies can provide checks and balances, but may face challenges of political interference and resource constraints. Distributed systems. Distributed systems disperse power among interconnected nodes or individuals, promoting decentralization and autonomy. Vulnerabilities and types of attacks. Sybil attacks. Malicious actors may exploit distributed systems through Sybil attacks, creating multiple fake identities to manipulate decision outcomes or control resources. Collusion. Collusion among a subset of participants can undermine the integrity of decision-making processes, leading to corruption and favoritism. Governance friction. Decentralized decision-making may lead to governance friction, hindering effective decision-making and creating opportunities for exploitation. Solutions and pros/cons. Identity verification. Implementing mechanisms to verify the identity of participants can help prevent the creation of fake identities. This may involve requiring participants to provide proof of identity or undergo a verification process participating in governmental activity. Consensus mechanisms. Implementing robust consensus mechanisms, such as proof of stake or proof of work, can mitigate Sybil attacks and ensure the integrity of decision-making processes. However, these mechanisms may be resource-intensive and computationally complex. Transparent governance. Promoting transparency and accountability in governance processes, such as through open-source protocols and public audits, can enhance trust and legitimacy. Yet, this may require significant coordination and resource allocation. Community engagement. Fostering community engagement and participation in decision-making can promote inclusivity and democratic values, but may face challenges of scalability and representation. Empowering individual citizens. Empowering individual citizens in governance can mitigate vulnerabilities to corruption and promote transparency and accountability. Solutions and pros/cons. Direct democratic processes. Enabling citizens to propose, vote on, and enact laws through direct democratic processes can enhance transparency and legitimacy. However, this may require education and infrastructure to facilitate participation. Decentralized governance platforms. Leveraging blockchain technology and decentralized platforms can promote transparency and reduce the risk of manipulation. Yet, this may face challenges of scalability and technological barriers. Legal enforcement. Implementing strict rules, regulations, and harsh legal punishments for corrupt practices can deter corruption and uphold the rule of law. However, this may require robust enforcement mechanisms and judicial independence. The current power system is riddled with systemic flaws that perpetuate inequality, marginalization, and exploitation. Addressing these flaws requires comprehensive reform efforts that prioritize diversity, inclusion, and equity in governance. By advocating for secular governance, representation, and resource redistribution, societies can build a more inclusive and equitable power structure that serves the interests of all citizens, regardless of their ethnicity, culture, or belief system. Furthermore, both hierarchical and distributed systems have vulnerabilities to corruption, but each presents unique challenges and opportunities for mitigation. Decentralization, transparency measures, and community engagement can enhance accountability and trust in governance. Empowering individual citizens through direct democratic processes and legal enforcement can promote transparency, accountability, and the rule of law. By implementing a combination of these approaches, we can build more resilient and equitable power structures that uphold democratic values and mitigate corruption effectively. Public voting systems serve as the cornerstone of democratic societies, providing citizens with the opportunity to express their preferences and shape the course of governance. However, these systems are not immune to manipulation and fraud, which can undermine the integrity of elections and erode public trust in the democratic process. Vote tampering. Public voting systems can be vulnerable to tampering, where individuals or groups alter the results by adding, removing, or modifying votes. This manipulation can occur through various means, including hacking into electronic voting machines, tampering with paper ballots, or exploiting vulnerabilities in the voting process. Manipulative tactics aimed at suppressing voter turnout or disenfranchising certain demographics can undermine the integrity of public voting systems. This may involve tactics such as voter intimidation, voter registration restrictions, or the dissemination of misinformation to deter participation. Election fraud encompasses a range of deceptive practices designed to subvert the electoral process and manipulate the outcome of an election. This can include fraudulent voter registration, absentee ballot fraud, or coercion of voters to cast their ballots in a particular way. Transparency is essential for ensuring the integrity of public voting systems. When voting processes and procedures are open to public scrutiny, citizens, election observers, and independent auditors can monitor the proceedings and detect any irregularities or anomalies. Implementing verification mechanisms, such as voter-verified paper trails or audit trails in electronic voting systems, can enhance transparency and accountability. These mechanisms allow voters to verify that their votes have been accurately recorded and provide a means for verifying election results through independent audits. Making voting records accessible to the public, while protecting voter privacy, can increase transparency and accountability in public voting systems. When votes are recorded in a publicly viewable database, individuals can independently verify the accuracy of election results and detect any discrepancies or manipulation. When votes are kept private and inaccessible for scrutiny, there is a lack of oversight and accountability in the voting process. Without transparency, it becomes difficult to detect and prevent manipulation or fraud, as nobody can independently verify the accuracy of election results. Keeping votes private opens up the potential for rigging, as there is no external validation or verification of the voting process. Without public access to voting records or audit trails, individuals or entities with malicious intent may exploit vulnerabilities in the system to manipulate election outcomes without detection. Media outlets often employ psychological techniques to influence public opinion. These include framing, priming, and emotional appeals, all of which can subtly shape individuals' perceptions and attitudes towards political issues and candidates. Colors used in media, such as political campaign materials or news graphics, can evoke specific emotions and associations. For example, the use of red may convey urgency or excitement, while blue may evoke feelings of trust and stability. By strategically employing color psychology, media can influence how individuals perceive political messages and candidates. Media manipulation often draws upon insights from social science research to target specific demographics and exploit cognitive biases. Techniques such as micro-targeting and personalized messaging allow media outlets to tailor content to individual preferences and predispositions, amplifying the impact of their messaging. Neurolinguistic programming, NLP techniques, which focus on understanding and influencing human behavior through language patterns and communication styles, are commonly employed in media manipulation. By crafting persuasive narratives and using linguistic cues, media can subtly shape individuals' perceptions and beliefs, often without their awareness. Media literacy education. Enhancing media literacy education can empower individuals to critically evaluate media content and recognize manipulative techniques. By educating the public about media manipulation tactics, individuals can become more discerning consumers of information and less susceptible to manipulation. Implementing regulatory measures to promote transparency and accountability in media reporting can help mitigate manipulation. This includes measures to ensure accuracy and impartiality in news reporting, as well as transparency in political advertising and campaign financing. Supporting independent fact-checking organizations can help counter misinformation and propaganda spread through media channels. By providing accurate and objective analysis of political claims and statements, fact-checking initiatives help hold media outlets accountable for the information they disseminate. The vulnerabilities present in public voting systems pose significant challenges to the integrity of democratic processes. Manipulative tactics such as vote tampering, voter suppression, and election fraud threaten to undermine the fairness and legitimacy of elections, eroding public trust in the democratic process. However, transparency serves as a crucial safeguard against manipulation, enabling citizens, election observers, and independent auditors to monitor voting procedures and detect irregularities. By promoting public scrutiny, implementing verification mechanisms, and ensuring accessibility to voting records, we can enhance transparency and accountability in public voting systems, thereby safeguarding the integrity of elections. Furthermore, addressing media manipulation through enhanced media literacy education, regulatory measures, and independent fact-checking initiatives is essential to counter misinformation and propaganda. By working towards greater transparency and accountability, we can uphold the principles of democracy and ensure that public voting systems remain a cornerstone of free and fair elections. Transparency in public office is vital for upholding democracy and ensuring accountability to the electorate. However, the infiltration of government, intelligence agencies, police, military, and public office by individuals affiliated with secretive groups, often in collaboration with media and news outlets, poses significant threats to democratic processes. Transparency is the cornerstone of democratic governance, allowing citizens to hold their elected officials accountable for their actions and decisions. It fosters trust in government institutions, promotes ethical conduct, and prevents abuses of power. Without transparency, democratic processes are vulnerable to manipulation and corruption, undermining the foundations of democracy itself. Affiliation with religious or secret societies can compromise the integrity and transparency of public office. Members of these groups may prioritize their allegiance to the organization over the public interest, leading to biased decision-making and the exploitation of government resources for personal or group gain. Moreover, the clandestine nature of these groups makes it difficult to detect and prevent their influence on public policy and governance. When secretive groups collaborate with media and news outlets, they gain a platform to manipulate public opinion and shape political narratives. Through biased reporting, propaganda, and misinformation campaigns, these groups can sway public perception, influence electoral outcomes, and undermine the credibility of democratic institutions. Collusion between secretive groups and media further erodes transparency and accountability in public office, as critical information is suppressed or distorted to serve the interests of a select few. Enhanced transparency measures. Strengthening transparency measures, such as mandatory disclosure of affiliations and financial interests for public officials, promotes accountability and exposes potential conflicts of interest. Implementing regulations to ensure impartiality, accuracy, and accountability in media reporting helps counteract the influence of secretive groups on public discourse and democratic processes. Independent oversight and investigations. Establishing independent oversight bodies with the authority to investigate collusion between public officials, secretive groups, and media outlets deters corrupt practices and holds perpetrators accountable for their actions. Educating the public about media manipulation tactics and encouraging critical thinking skills empowers citizens to discern fact from fiction and resist efforts to manipulate public opinion. Transparency in public office is essential for safeguarding democracy and upholding the principles of accountability and integrity. The collusion between individuals affiliated with secretive groups and media outlets poses grave threats to democratic processes, as it enables manipulation of public opinion and undermines trust in government institutions. By strengthening transparency measures, regulating media practices, and promoting media literacy, societies can mitigate the influence of secretive groups and protect the integrity of democratic governance. It is imperative to remain vigilant in defending transparency and accountability in public office to preserve the foundations of democracy for future generations.